Politics 1964. Though in the Republican convention, opposing factions had opportunity to speak to the whole convention and have roll call votes, the European press reported it as a coup by fanatics and cultists of fascist mentality. The Democrat convention, despite physical disorder, was expertly controlled politically. No roll call votes were taken and no anti-administration speeches made. It was reported in Europe with approval and with enthusiasm for the nominees. Senator Humphrey's acceptance speech flung a direct challenge at the Republican nominee. Constitutional conservatives, the backbone of Senator Goldwater's support, welcomed the challenge and wish he would take it up with equal directness, standing unequivocally on his conservative voting record. They feel this would keep alive the fervor for him, which is his main political advantage over President Johnson. That is a summary of my report on Politics 1964, the full report after a message from my sponsor. The Republican National Convention was a good example of what is often called the American democratic process. It was a Goldwater convention from beginning to end in the sense that the majority of delegates favored Senator Goldwater. It was equally obvious that the Goldwater people did not have the tight organization and professional management to control the convention and run it like a political machine. Every opposing faction had full opportunity to air its views to the whole convention and to the nation. Roll call votes, including nomination of presidential and vice presidential candidates, were taken, giving every state a chance to register its view. The Goldwater forces won all votes, not because of political experience, superior organization, or powerful high-level pressures, but because of their preponderance of numbers. I was in London the day after Senator Goldwater was nominated. Having watched almost every minute of the convention, I was fascinated to see the British press reporting that the Goldwater forces were a small minority of fanatics and cultists, and that the Republican convention could be likened to the Munich beer hall coup of the early 1930s, when Hitler and his small band of black shirt cutthroats tried to seize power in Germany. The British denounced Goldwater for saying that the Western powers should seek victory over communism, saying that no NATO nation would join the United States in Goldwater's crusade against the communists. Such remarks by leading Europeans could cause some American taxpayers to feel they have been deceived. Our government has given more than 54 billion tax dollars in direct aid to the NATO nations and spends additional billions annually to maintain American forces in Europe, all for the purpose of strengthening the NATO countries to fight and resist communism, of making NATO a free world shield against communist aggression. NATO was erected with France as the keystone. To strengthen this keystone of the NATO alliance, our government has given France more than $11 billion. But de Gaulle has virtually withdrawn France from NATO. France now, far from being allied with the United States, generally opposes the United States on vital issues. Our aid to Greece is more than $3,800 million, to Turkey more than $3,700 million. Greece has withdrawn forces from NATO for use against Turks in Cyprus. Turkey has withdrawn forces from NATO for use against Greeks. Why has Senator Goldwater based his foreign policy position on support of NATO? The two persons generally credited with persuading him to take such a stand are Dr. Robert Strauss-Hupé and General Lyman L. Limnitzer. Both are members of the Council on Foreign Relations, often called the control center of an invisible government whose policies are the exact opposite of everything Senator Goldwater has stood for in the Senate. Goldwater's real supporters are constitutional conservatives who are opposed to such entangling permanent alliances as NATO, which, they believe, are dragging us toward war and eventual submergence in one-world socialism. The Democrat National Convention was a good example of a brilliantly organized political gathering, expertly controlled from behind the scenes. There was more physical disorder at Atlantic City, uncontrollable congestion and noise in the hall, crowding and confusion at the entrance gates, but political control was perfect, and the control lay in the hands of President Johnson. Delegates favoring Johnson clearly had a commanding majority from beginning to end. But it is impossible to say what Johnson's numerical strength was. There was not one roll call vote revealing how many were for or how many against President Johnson. Obviously, factional cleavages at the Democrat convention were as embittered as any at the Republican. But not one speech against Johnson or against Johnson's policies reached the lectern where the whole convention and the nation could hear it. Every issue and every candidate presented at the convention were presented by Johnson forces or by President Johnson himself and adopted by acclamation, which is a shouting contest among all persons in the hall, delegates and outsiders alike, the outcome determined by sheer volume. On occasions when such an acclamation vote was taken at the Democrat convention, the place was crowded with outsiders, often so crowded that official delegates could not get in. European newspapers, however, reported nothing about behind-the-scenes control, Munich beer hall coup, or power manipulation in connection with the Democrat convention. There were approval and rejoicing, especially about the choice of Senator Humphrey. Liberal enthusiasm for Senator Hubert Humphrey at home and abroad is easy to understand. Humphrey's acceptance speech forthrightly spelled out the issues, clearly outlining the liberal program. From the viewpoint of constitutional conservatives, the best speech made in connection with either national convention was the speech of George C. Wallace, Democrat governor of Alabama, before the platform committee of the Democrat Party, expressing the conservative philosophy even more forthrightly than Senator Humphrey expressed the liberal philosophy. Governor Wallace said, among other things, quote, "The leadership of the Democrat Party has consciously advocated, sponsored, and sold an alien philosophy of government. The people are disgusted and repelled by the duplicity and platitudes of politicians who would sell the birthright of our nation to be re-elected. Expansion of federal power has altered our form of government without consent of the people. A so-called civil rights bill, an anti-poverty bill, a no-win war, fiscal irresponsibility, a judiciary which initiates, administers, prosecutes, and punishes. This is revolution," end quote. President Johnson's acceptance speech rather well illustrated the remark of NBC News commentator David Brinkley to the effect that Johnson is the first man in history to run on a platform of prosperity and poverty at the same time. The acceptance speech of U.S. Representative William Miller, Republican vice presidential nominee, was a brief statement about the pride and pleasure of receiving such an honor and a promise to do the best possible. Senator Barry Goldwater's acceptance speech contained many generalities pleasing to constitutional conservatives, many that were displeasing. Senator Goldwater did express the basic creed of constitutional conservatives when he spoke of limiting the federal government to the performance of tasks needed and constitutionally sanctioned. On August 12, 1964, Senator Goldwater met with Republican leaders at Hershey, Pennsylvania. The meeting was sponsored by William Scranton, liberal Republican governor of Pennsylvania. All prominent persons attending, except Senator Goldwater himself, were liberals or self-styled moderates, strongly opposed to the conservatism which Senator Goldwater has supported more consistently than any other person in the United States Senate. Indeed, most of the prominent persons attending the Hershey Unity meeting are connected one way or another with the Council on Foreign Relations apparatus, widely known as the Invisible Government. After the Hershey meeting, Senator Goldwater released a statement written by two former White House aides of President Eisenhower, promising, among other things, to return to policies of the Eisenhower administration and to consult Eisenhower and Nixon before choosing major cabinet officers. Many constitutional conservatives see little difference between Eisenhower policies and Kennedy-Johnson policies. They want Barry Goldwater to become president and change the policies. Senator Humphrey's acceptance speech flung a clear and direct challenge at Senator Goldwater, scorning the very voting record that has made Goldwater the conservative leader. Many observers believe that if Goldwater, with equal clarity and directness, would take up the Humphrey challenge and give voters for the first time in this generation an obvious choice between his proven conservatism and Humphrey's proven liberalism, he would probably beat President Johnson by at least 15 million votes, because in meeting the issues head-on, he would rekindle the enthusiasm of constitutional conservatives whose ardor for his candidacy was responsible for his nomination. Ardent enthusiasm for a candidate is often the decisive force in an election. President Johnson, though enjoying tremendous political support, does not seem to have that ardor on his side. Goldwater did have it at the time of his nomination. Here is a letter, typical of many which began coming to me from all parts of the United States immediately after Senator Goldwater's August 12th unity meeting with Republican liberals. Quote, "What has happened to Senator Goldwater since the nomination? I worked my heart out for him for 2 years, and now he is taking orders from the Scranton, Rockefeller, Eisenhower crowd that I helped him find. He is hedging and trying to explain away the courageous stands which had convinced me he was the man I wanted for president. I will vote for Senator Goldwater in November because I don't have any other choice, but I'm through working for him." End quote. My answers to such letters have been that they should be written to Senator Goldwater. He served constitutional conservatives well for many years in the Senate. They should not lose touch with him in this critical election year. Whether Senator Goldwater did stay in touch with constitutional conservatives, the backbone of his support will probably be revealed by the counting of the ballots in November. And now a special word to all of you. If you approve of my broadcast, please let my sponsors know about it. Without them, there would be no broadcast from me. And unless they know of your support, by direct action on your part, and support of them in every way that you can, they have no way of knowing whether they are accomplishing a real purpose. Goodbye, God bless you. For the documented text of this broadcast, send 25 cents to Dan Smoot, Dallas 14, Texas, and ask for 472. Politics, 1964. 6 copies, $1.